Today I'm out in the woods with J.H. Northrup, and we're going to revisit ash cakes. Thanks for joining us today on 18th Century Cooking with James Townsend and Son. J.H. Northrup here is a longtime friend. He lives in our area and he's been reenacting since the late 80s. Currently he does 7 Years' War, a Russian soldier interpretation. Way back in the first cooking series, we covered ash cakes, specifically colonial American soldiers and their use of ash cakes in the Revolutionary War. Today we're going to be looking at ash cakes used in a couple of different cultural perspectives, specifically 18th century Russian soldiers and 17th century Native Americans in Virginia.
Well, what I found, John, was going through some records, an archaeological dig actually from the Battle of Kunersdorf, 1759. There was a piece in there talking about the Russian ovens, and we'd been having an ongoing dialogue about ovens and camp ovens and what they would have been, and found out that what the Russian troops were actually doing was they were being issued whole grains, wheat or barley, we're guessing at this point.
I think rye is going to be the most popular one for the Russian troops.
They're being issued whole grains, and they're grinding them themselves. They're digging a pit, and they're lining it with fabric, kneading the dough in there.
So these pits, they sound like they're pretty big, or else they would just mix it in their personal vessels, their bowl or pot. So they must be making up a whole lot of dough at once. So this must be like a whole regiment or whatever making up their rye cakes for a longer period of time.
And then they're taking that dough to what they describe as a hemispheric pit with fire in it, and they would take the bread dough and set it on top of the coals, go ahead, cook that down for a bit, take it off, and then they would bring it back and do a second baking.
You know, what I read on that was that they either baked it twice or they baked it once, and then they took that bread and they put it out in the sun to dry completely. And that is likely to make that so that those loaves would last for a long time. My guess is up to a month. And that was common practice, just like in ship's biscuits, where you bake it multiple times to drive the moisture out so that those don't mold right away. I found some other interesting information about Russian troops. It's a little piece, I'm not sure where it's from exactly, but it said, "Neither could white bread substitute black leaven bread. When Russian troops who entered the boundaries of the Khanate of Crimea in 1736 got isolated from their rye flour carts, and bread had to be made from wheat flour, diseases set in among the troops." So it sounds like what they really wanted was rye flour and not wheat flour. That leads me to the Virginia Indians and their grain of choice. This is from the History of Virginia by Robert Beverly. It's 1722, so it's speaking of 17th century Virginian Indians. And it says, when talking about their bread, it says they bake their bread either in cakes before the fire or in loaves on a warm hearth, covering the loaf first with leaves and then with warm ashes and afterwards with coals over all. So here they were using ashes as a layer of insulation between the coals and their cake of bread that they're baking. And obviously what they're baking here is Indian corn or Indian meal that they pounded up. So that's what we're going to work with today, both rye flour and Indian corn meal. What we're going to do right now is we're going to mix some ash cakes up. I'm going to give you some rye flour. I've got some cornmeal, and I'm going to make up some cornmeal ash cakes. This stuff always has a bit more flavor if you add some salt to it. A little bit of water from your canteen to start out with, and then we can just mix this right up. And we just want a thick paste. Here's mine.
Okay.
And we kind of want to make it flat so that it can bake all the way through. See, now that we can bake right on the coals, it's going to hold together great. This, because of the way the corn meal is, will probably try to bust apart. So now what we have to do is prepare this fire pit. We want a nice little bed of coals. So this has only been cooking a few minutes, but you can already tell from the underside that it's probably cooking up pretty quick. So let's see if we can get her flipped over. It's almost perfectly clean. So cooking on the ashes and cooking on the coals is really not bad at all.
So there would still be moisture in this when we're done.
Right.
But the second cooking or baking is what actually drives that out.
Right. I'm gonna go ahead and give that to JH. You can let that cool for a minute. Maybe carve off that little black bit. I've got some pawpaw leaves here. They're nice and big. This time of year, there's not a ton of good green leaves to choose from. And I'm just gonna place one on either side just to protect it and keep it from getting all burnt up like his. This would probably turn out better if I had a chance to get ashes on it first. Where the leaf is, feels nice and warm. It tastes really good. It's a lot like a very simple cornbread, except I don't have any butter. But that's all right. That little bit of salt gives it a wonderful buttery hint.
It's warmed all the way through. I mean, there's still the moisture in the center. But yeah, that if I had to choose between this and that, I'd take this.
If you get a chance to make ash cakes, it's one of the simplest foods you can make. We know that it was common for American soldiers to be using either wheat flour or cornmeal if they didn't have wheat flour available to them, used in the Native American situation. So a very, very common style of food. If you get a chance, make sure to try it. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also visit our website and you can request a print catalog. I want to thank you for joining us today as we savor the flavors and the aromas of the 18th century.